Don't play that for a dog. I can tell you, they don't like it. But in any case, so wonderful, very tactile, right? I mean, this is what I talked about at the beginning, is that electronic instruments aren't like drums and guitars, but this one kind of almost is. Except, I have no idea what's happening. All right, it's like if you're not like a little disciple of indeterminacy, all of that gets thrown away. But, you know, this is sort of the direction I was going in. And normally when I create these systems, it's sort of like one technology, one piece. You know, they're sort of tied up in a very particular structure, this notion of instrument and score just kind of being applied together. I made this bizarre instrument in the mid-'80s. Yes, it is a trombone with a speaker attached to the mouthpiece, a retractable dog leash that goes around half a mouse, and it's attached to, it must have been 15 kilos of electronic equipment to do the I think it was the first live sampling and signal processing instrument that existed. And I did for several years these projects of improvisation with players. And this is a duo with a wonderful trumpet player. So this is live catching of his instrument and transforming it digitally. And making multiple images of it. And it all came out of the mouth of the bell of the trombone, so it sounded like an acoustic instrument. Crazy. Okay, so I made this instrument. It took like a year. It was an impossibly complicated thing. It involved like soldering, it involved welding brass together, it involved programming, drilling a lot of holes, and I did it for making one 10-minute piece. You know? And then it turned out to be a wonderful instrument for improvisation. It's the first time this ever happened to me. I'm not a player of anything conventional. But in 1986, 1987, this idea of going on stage with another musician that you've never met before, like some weird singles bar, and you would grab their sounds and suddenly be throwing them back at them, like made backwards, upside down, and all of this and that. It was different. It wasn't what was happening. And it was a very beautiful entry point for me into the world of improvisation, which had always been a part of my listening diet, but I had never been a player, so it had never really been accessible to me. And it had this beautiful acoustic quality of these tinny sounds coming out of the trombone bell, like an old gramophone, despite the fact that it was hooked up to an embedded computer. So it was nice, but two things happened. In 1994, a taxi at Schiphol Airport in Amsterdam ran over my trombone. And I built a replacement, but it was like second love. It was never exactly the same. And then, you know, by around 2006, looping pedals were everywhere. An old friend of mine would send me every month a picture of some guitar pedal saying, it's a trombone in a box. So I just, like, from one minute to the next, lost any interest whatsoever in loops and echo and all that kind of stuff. And meanwhile, the whole hacking workshop thing had taken over my listening. I was interested in chaos. And I said, hang on a sec. You've got this tripartite division. Let's call it a prejudice about what technology does what best. And you've always told yourself, oh, for instability, you know, you want to work in the physical world where strings rattle against frets and reeds split when you blow in them and you get an accidental harmonic. And you've always thought of computers as these sort of metalogical, sort of like cliched control freaks. What if you actually applied yourself, Nick, and tried to write software that behaved like a circuit that was breaking down? And I thought, interesting, I've been writing code for 30 years, it's never occurred to me. So I did. And I did it, I accomplished it, I think. But I had this sort of like idea, that's the technology for improvisation going forward. It had been 10 years since my last trombone had been retired. I thought, okay, I'm going to make an instrument that's an improvising instrument based on this notion of programming indeterminate circuitry software. So I bought a trumpet for 40 euro because I don't want to carry anything as big as a trombone anymore. Come on, I'm going to be 70 next year. Cut me a break. So there's a little speaker in there, and it's connected. It has a little Arduino computer on it there, and an amp that drives the speaker, and each piston. Whoa! Don't do that. Each piston has a little magnet at the end, and there's a magnetic field sensor so that it detects where the piston is, so that each piston of each valve of the trombone is like a slide fader on a mixer, right? And then it's got a pressure sensor from a fuel injection system, €2, to detect breath. And what do we have? Yeah, and the sound comes out of a little speaker, and it works very nicely. And the way the software is written, do we want to, and the nicest thing is it has a toilet plunger with an infrared remote control from a television built in. So I could have a few switches. It has very few control elements. It's not a complicated instrument. It follows the theory of what's known as few to many controls, which is having just a small number of sensors that map out to a very large number of parameters. And the basic idea behind the software is, this is terrifying. This is really for the technical audience. But the idea behind the software is to make an instrument that every time you turn it on is completely scrambled, so you don't know what it's going to do. There's a cliche in improvisation. I wish I could play my instrument the way I did the first time I took it out of the case. All those mistakes, everything else, right? Like imagine being able to fall off a bicycle after you learn how to ride a bike. It's just about impossible, okay? So I said, but the computer could really help fuck you up. Which is to say, it's essentially as if you had a piano that every time you opened the lid, you discovered that each key was redirected to a different string than it was the day before. So that when you begin to improvise with this instrument, you're not only improvising with the poor sucker who's on stage with you, but you're improvising with your own instrument, all right? And are these great graphics? This is what happens when you give up on doing graphics yourself and you hire an ex-student. But I won't go into it. There's a little Max program I wrote that is a shell that lets me add new voices anytime I get inspired. The problem is that when you do computers music and you work with real players, you get off stage and you think, oh, I'm so sad. That person just went like, and made this amazing noise, and I programmed for 6 hours, and it just sounds terrible. And you go home and you cry a little, and after 4 days you say, but they made one sound that I could do. And then that becomes, one of those little voices. It became tweet, or something like that. And this is what it sounds like. second output when you're feeling small. On stage, you can throw it to the speakers, and it goes like that. So in any case, it worked. It worked for me in the sense that I got to the point that after this immersion in the chaos of groups of hackers, I somehow managed to distill the essential qualities of both the human social situation of that group and the technology they were working with, and figured out a way to wrap it into a software shell so that I could manipulate it. And I could create a set of hooks onto it that made it a very instrumental, playable environment to work in, such that I could work with improvisers, which was my goal. You don't care, really, that I set goals for myself and I accomplish particular things. But hey, if you ever want to do this, now you know how. That doesn't work, does it? No. In any case, but that is essentially what I wanted to tell you, was the notion that you can move back and forth between these different technologies and become aware of the implications resident in each one, but you can also use it to press and push at the edges of the way you work with any one of those. It's a much more fluid field than many people will think. And at the moment, we have a lot of very hybrid activities going on in sort of electronic arts, and so it's a nice viewpoint to have looking into it. I will mention that 30 minutes on the button, I will be performing the piece with the glove in its performance glory tonight, and also I'll be playing this strange trumpet instrument. So either leave now or say, I think I want to know more, and come back later. And I think now would be the appropriate time to stop and ask if there are any questions, and do whatever must be done to transfer our streaming process into Q&A mode.